Good morning, everybody. Welcome to a beautiful brand new day. It is a gorgeous day here in the Enchanted Forest, here in West Michigan. Absolutely beautiful. The air is crisp, it's cool. Oh, it feels so good. The sky is blue, and the animals are happy. The trees are happy. I'm happy. It's just a beautiful day here. It's a brand new day, and welcome to Exploring Sacred. And the subject of sacred. For those of you that are listening, hey, Carla Joe, the chat room is open, so welcome, come on in. And it's definitely an interesting year, and yet sacred is still all around us. We experience sacred in so many ways, and oftentimes we think that we need to experience it somewhere outside of us, outside of our home, and we often do. Because that's where we're looking for sacred, is outside of us. And perhaps outside of our patch of land or our condominium, apartment, home, whatever it happens to be. It's out there. Sacred places are out there. And so we look for them and we go to visit them and explore them, and we take photos of them and videos, and maybe we live stream while we are in those sacred spaces. And then we come home and we reminisce about having found sacred somewhere else. So what about bringing sacred home? What about bringing what it is that we found at a magical place in our explorations? Maybe it was at a lake or a pond or a foreign country or just another state outside of our own. What about bringing the magic home, and how do we do that? How do we make that experience last rather than just in an album or in our photo book on Facebook or Instagram? How about bringing that home? Let's talk about that today. Hey, Tara. Hey, Sonia. I see that you got a really great space up there at the campground. Looked like everybody was having a great time. I've been to some pretty amazing sacred spaces with Tara Rietberg. She's an extraordinary photographer, and I have some pretty astounding photographs from all over the world where Tara and I have visited together. And when I look through the books of photographs, the old-fashioned photo books, it brings back memories and thoughts and experiences and energy, right? And I think I've done a pretty good job of bringing those energies home, because why do we go out to sacred spaces anyway? Right? Hopefully it's to bring those experiences home. So whether we have an extraordinary day out at Lake Michigan or up at Lake Superior or wherever you happen to be, maybe it was just really a sacred day, a special day. How do you bring that energy home, and how do we not forget it? Well, oftentimes we bring home trinkets, or we bring home something that helps us to remember the experience. And we can put it on a shelf or maybe in a sacred space in our home to bring that energy back into our home. But does it stay on the shelf, or does it continue to live within us? I think really is what I'm saying here. Do we bring the experience? And one of the things that I've noticed even with myself in having sacred experiences, those experiences where I'm not busy taking photographs of the experiences, because I do love taking photographs of the experiences. It's really in those experiences that I find they rest most deeply and peacefully within me, because I was fully present. I was fully present to the moment, not looking for the perfect shot, which I am very, very guilty of. Guilty as charged, because I like to keep memories, and I like to keep the visual memory. But what I've learned to do for myself is to grab a couple of shots and put the phone down, and to be fully present in the here, in the now, in the presence of the sacred, in the presence of the sounds, of the smells, of the conversations, of the sky, of the earth, to really immerse myself in it. I've been thinking about these things for the past couple of weeks. Why is it that some of those memories are so fleeting and others are so deep within me? Well, I think that there are a couple of reasons for that, but for me, that's one of the most practical. Dana, put that phone down. Stop taking so many pictures and just enjoy the moment. And allow yourself to be perfumed in whatever it is that you're experiencing right now so you can bring that home with you. Right? I mean, how does everybody else feel about that? Hey, Sonia's saying, might just go back one more time this year. Yeah, Todd and I are going up to Copper Harbor at the very end of September. And our campsite with my new gypsy van. Thank you, Marianne Molika, for my amazing license plates. Marianne sent me these beautiful license plates that have her photographic artistry in the background and the wording gypsy. So Todd is creating the perfect place inside and outside my gypsy van for those beautiful pieces to adorn her. But there we will be up at Copper Harbor, Michigan. There at the great lake they call Gitche Gumee, literally backed right up. And just within like maybe 100 feet is a cliff overlooking the Great Lake that they call Gitche Gumee. For those of you that, like me, are Gordon Lightfoot fans, oh my God, I love Gordon Lightfoot. I never get tired of Gordon Lightfoot or his songs ever. I think Todd gets really tired of me playing so much Gordon Lightfoot, but luckily he enjoys them too. But anyway, back to the Great Lake they call Gitche Gumee. The fact of the matter is, now that's a sacred space. I mean, there are so many sacred spaces, and it is where we find them and what we make of our experiences. I can have a sacred experience out in my, the back forest here in the Enchanted Forest, or under a full moon here at my home. But it's going to be an occasion where I'm really going to practice the new craft of putting the phone down and just being present there at the autumn equinox with Superior and the spirit of that great lake, and with the sunrises and the sunsets and nature. Carla Jo is saying Copper Harbor is beautiful. That's what I understand. And I was raised by two people who were Yoopers, and we never made it up to Copper Harbor. So I am really looking forward to exploring. Dane and Melissa were up there earlier. And Dane called me and he said, Ma, you got to come to Copper Harbor. There it is, way up north. I probably can just wave at our Canadian neighbors across the lake there. And I'm committed to just really being in the sacred space of it all and bringing that home. Hey, Katie Battle. She's saying she's been trying to get away from her phone also. Yeah, I'm doing more and more of that. Turning it off, laying it down, letting it be. One thing that I've noticed in the erosion of bringing sacred home, at least for me, is this perceived necessity to always have it on and going, always looking at it, checking. And it was really brave for me, to come to a point where I said, I need to enjoy more of my life, not tethered to. Because I can't be fully present in the here and now with my grandson, with my friends, with colleagues, with nature, with my horses, with Dominic and Gabriel, if I'm continuously and always fidgeting with that electronic device. Right? And in bringing sacred home, being fully present is so important. And it is amazing how the monkey mind, our human brain, can all of a sudden run away with a certain train of thought, kind of like the way that I just did about Gordon Lightfoot. Right, there I go. I've been accused of having a monkey mind. Every so often, my husband reminds me that I get easily diverted. I think it's because I'm so interested in so many things. I'm always looking. By the way, your grandson is so stinking cute. He is a pill. Thank you for that, Katie. Yesterday I was with him. Elise is finishing up her nursing degree, as you all know. So I'm helping by taking care of Easton while she's earning the money to pay for her last semester and then going through her last semester, which ends in mid-December. But he was lying on the floor, so being the kind of gran that I am, I'm right there on the floor with him. And I was wearing, Tara, you'll remember this. I have on my Isis pendant that I bought in Aswan. Remember when we went jewelry shopping there in Egypt, in Aswan? So I had him this beautiful pendant. It was kind of dangling down over his face, and he was looking at it, and he was touching it and feeling it and really ensconced in it. And so Easton and I had this great long conversation about maybe one day he and I will ride camels together across the Giza Plateau to the Great Pyramid, past the Sphinx. And he was so there with me in that conversation, even as this little bitty guy who's getting really big. He was just looking at me with this look on his face, saying to me, "But Grandma, I've already been to the Great Pyramid. I know that I have." So he and I, which is pretty good for a 10-month-old baby, he and I had a long conversation about Egypt and about exploring the world and making memories and bringing those memories back home. And so I explained to him that the pendant is of the goddess Isis. And we talked about Isis, or I talked and he listened. He was very intent on listening. And I explained Aswan and the difference between the way people dress in Aswan, Egypt, which is much more metropolitan, than perhaps when we're heading down to Nubia. There are fewer galabayas and burqas in Aswan than there are on the way to Nubia. We talked about all these things, 15 minutes, and he just laid there. Finally, Grandma's elbows and knees were getting a little bit sore, so we had to get lunch ready for him. Whether we're traveling to Egypt or traveling to our own backyard, being present is so important, I think, especially right now, to put away the digital stuff, right? Getting away from the talking heads and every bit of streaming news that may or may not be real, coming at us from every direction at all times of the day and the night, and to go back to being present with the sacred, the sacredness of nature, the sacredness of quiet conversation with our own selves, with our ancestors, with our guardian angels, with Creator, with our dreams, sitting with our dreams. I've had some great conversations in the last week and a half with both of my sisters, Del Marie and Barbara. Beautiful long conversations about dreams and the way that spirit comes to us in dreams and our loved ones and allies. The way that they come to us when we pay attention and we don't just brush everything off, but we really take a look and we integrate. We integrate. Hey, hihane washte chue. Your birthday's coming up, Del. Happy early birthday. Saturday is your birthday. Sonia's saying that was the best part about camping. Kind of a vacay from Facebook. Right on. I'm with you, Sonia. Getting away from all of that and really experiencing. One time, gosh, years ago, so many years ago, I was at a workshop. And in the workshop, the facilitator asked us to take a look at the person sitting across from us in the workshop, who maybe we hadn't even introduced ourselves to, but asked us to take a moment to look into the eyes of the person sitting across from us. and to not say a word, but to just really look, eyeball to eyeball. Now there's a sacred experience. Looking somebody eyeball to eyeball without speaking, without the nervous laughter, without the hemming and the hawing, but just gazing. It was a little off-putting for some. Some immediately fell into tears. And I was awestruck by the fact that it suddenly dawned on me just how sacred it is to look into somebody's eyes and to allow someone else to look into mine. We also had a very similar experience with Amantha Murphy last year at the school. And Amantha is at this moment, I think, still planning on coming to the school, I believe. I need to get a hold of her to find out. Things are a little bit cattywampus here in Michigan with regard to what we can allow and not allow. And anyway, back to the class. And I partnered up with Maggie Marchwinski. And it was her job to sit with me and me to sit with her and to gaze into one another's eyes, but also into their energy. I needed to allow her to come into my energy. Well, number one, I trust Maggie implicitly. I wouldn't just allow probably anybody into the sacred space of my energy. Well, I know that it's not a probably. I don't do that. Part of it is my Scorpio nature, and the other is, just me being me. But allowing somebody into your sacred space of your energy, into the sacred space of the window of your eyes. We can say that we really know somebody, but when was the last time that you really, really sank into their energy, were present with them without the need to converse? I think there's a lot of sacredness too in laughter. There are a lot of things that I remember based on how hard we laughed. You guys know what I'm saying? Good morning, cousin. Hey, Laura Smith. The windows of the soul, that's right. Carla Joe. Hey, Priestess Laura. I think that there is a whole lot of sacred when it comes to laughter. And I can remember times laughing so hard. And to me, those are very sacred times. It's amazing some of the things that I can remember. I can bypass a whole lot of other stuff, but by golly, I'll remember sitting in the kitchen with Del Marie and Barbara and Claudia, laughing my butt off. Excuse me while I assist Gabriel. It wouldn't be a Wednesday morning if Dominic didn't torment Gabriel just a little bit while I'm in here. Yeah, there's a whole lot of sacred when it comes to laughter. I was thinking this morning, Donna, you'll appreciate this, as I was showering and getting ready for the day, and I had already been out gardening for an hour, came in and I'm showering, getting ready for my day. And I thought to myself, I was thinking about Elise, my daughter. And she is a very funny, great sense of humor person. She can get anybody laughing really quick. And I thought to myself, well, I certainly know genetically where that came from. Because I don't think that there's a member of the King family that isn't funny. I mean, genuinely, sometimes roll off your chair and onto the floor and around the floor laughing funny. They are some of the most humorous people I've ever met in my life. And it doesn't matter where you are, what time it is. They're just funny people, and there's always laughter. And then it took me to the thought of my sister Barbara, who always says, this is her phrase, after she can tell me something that's so heart-rending and challenging, and then she'll say, but do you want to hear something funny? She always ends conversation with, do you want to hear something funny? Del Marie does that same thing. should bring up something funny, because laughter is good medicine. And laughter is very sacred. There are some sacred places, I believe, that we go, hey, Sally. Katie's saying, yes, isn't it funny when you laugh so hard you can't remember what you were laughing about? Oh, yeah. I have some great travel photos of me and Priestess Laura laughing. I have a couple photos of me and Laura right here at my home, and we were laughing. Somebody caught us laughing with one another. Don't know what we were laughing about at the time, but boy, I look at the photos and the vibe just comes right off. Just laughing. Sometimes I think we can go into sacred so deeply that there really aren't words. We just carry it home within us. It just comes home with us, and we're different. We're different, Donna's saying. That's sweet. Well, you have to admit, Donna, it's a pretty funny group of people when all the cousins are together. And I think half the time it's not even intended to be funny. It's just funny. Funny. Nikki, hey, Nikki Jorgensen. Fawn would do that. Many of our conversations were spent laughing and tears rolling down. And isn't it just wonderful how we remember that? I remember meeting, my cousin Wanda, and 5 minutes after meeting Wanda, I was already laughing about something to do with, she was talking about Shania Twain. That sticks in my mind. So every time I hear Shania Twain singing, it brings me back to Wanda saying something funny about Shania Twain being in Hawkinsville. Or Donna, your comment to cousin Anne Marie about the shoes that she was wearing while we were going to the Veterans Memorial Park, right? Laugh. Todd and I still chuckle about that. Sacred times can be like, have this exclamation point of laughter. Doesn't always have to be pious and sacred and holy and quiet and all of that. It can be. And oftentimes those are the moments that you bring home to yourself unless somebody captures it. And I remember we were at Chartres Cathedral in France. Nikki, Laura, you were there because you took a photograph of me. And you took another photograph of me for the piece that I did to promote this show. That wasn't Chartres Cathedral, but that was the Cathedral of the Black Madonna in this case. But when we were in Chartres Cathedral, and I was in the Lady Chapel praying, and maybe you'll both remember this. I was, unbeknownst to me, while I was kneeling in the Lady Chapel at Chartres Cathedral in France, you took a photograph. And when I was done, I believe I was saying the rosary. When I was done and I walked back out of the Lady Chapel, both of you stood there with a look on your faces. And I knew something had happened, that you bore witness to something within yourself or in the space we were in there in France. And sometimes we can't really put words to those experiences. I mean, you explained it to me as best you could in that moment, and I still have these two photos. The Church of the Black Madonna. Boy, there's a place, isn't it? In France. For me, sacred places, I love going to wonderful ruins of sacred places. Next year, I'm taking a wonderful group to Ireland, and there's a wonderful abbey, Muckross Abbey. Oh my goodness. It's in ruins. I mean, not ruins like pebbles like you see in Greece and things like that, but it's pretty much, it's not being used, let's just say. And for some of us, Rose and Amantha had to pry us out of the ruins of Muckross Abbey. It was so magical with that yew tree that The whole cathedral was built around. The yew tree is still there, and it's astonishing to walk around the corridors of the abbey and of the church and of the cemetery. And everyone is quiet and just absorbing the energy of sacred. We'll be going back there again next October with my travel company. And Rose and Amantha will take us not only to those types of places, but to the Stonehenges, the stone circles that are so ancient. We can listen to the sacred stories because the stones hold the stories. The land holds the stories. The space holds the stories. And if we're quiet enough, and if we put down our iPhone or Android long enough to stop taking photographs, but to be present with what the stones are relaying to us, or the land, we're going to go to some pretty astonishing places that only Amantha can get us into, or get us to there in Ireland, because she knows everybody on that entire island of Ireland. I'm certain of it, and they love her. We go to so many sacred spaces. I love traveling around the world. Can't wait to get into Scandinavia, Iceland, right? And what about right here in our own backyard? I was having a great conversation yesterday with Chue Barb about Medicine Wheel, Wyoming. And she was just up there for sacred ceremony with a medicine man. And she said they had to hold all the tourists back so that he could have his ceremony, but he wanted me there for the ceremony. And why were they up in Medicine Wheel, Wyoming? He had to bring a stone back to the circle. If you've ever seen photographs of Medicine Wheel, it's pretty glorious. I've not been yet, and I do plan to go. My travel company, once we're back on terra firma, post-COVID, will be making wonderful trips to places like Medicine Wheel, Serpent Mound, Devil's Tower, aka Greyhorn, Hesapa, the Black Hills. We're going to go to some sacred spaces right here in and on Turtle Island. Laura saying, yes, a very magical time. The ancestral wisdom. Yeah, it's amazing what it feels like when we're being bathed in the sacredness of our ancestors. And for many of us, we find that in other countries, across the pond, as they say. We find sacred by going to the land of our ancestors, because our bones and our blood remember that our ancestors walked on Santorini Island. Mine did. Mine walked in Africa. Mine walked all over Italy, the Congo. That's where they began. For me, they began in Africa. They began in Italy until the Norsemen arrived there in the markets in that channel by Delos. Remember that? Tara being on Delos? And in the home of Cleopatra? Who knew Cleopatra had a little home there on the island of Delos? And there we were, where she met up with Mark Antony. And we can feel that in our blood and our bones. And so we're having a sacred space, not only with our current day mindset and body, but we're also having an experience with our ancestors who are very much alive in spirit, but they're also in our blood and our bones, and they're sharing sacred with us. And they look through our eyes and they feel through our body. And so it's a multi-dimensional experience of sacred to sit in Chartres Cathedral. I mean, Donna, you and I have many French ancestors from the Languedoc region, there in the French Riviera, the place of Mary Magdalene. And here on Turtle Island, there are so many sacred spaces. And, Donna and I, last autumn, we went to a beautiful place there in Georgia to honor our own Native American ancestors, who are Cherokee and Seminole Creek. It was really quite something to be there in that sacred, and how quiet we get when we know we're with sacred. And laying down tobacco in honor of those relatives in that sacred space. Down south, Native America looks a little bit different than it does out west or up north here. But you can feel it, and it's a quiet understanding. Very quiet understanding. Carla Jo is saying, so looking forward to those trips. Laura's saying, think Carl can come over and drive the bus? Who's Carl? Oh my goodness. Carl is our Welsh driver. I love Wales. And a good part of, at least on the king side of my ancestry, were Welsh and Scottish and Native American. So Wales is it's extraordinary. And I always wanted to go to Wales. Why? Because, well, Stevie Nicks is known as the Welsh Witch, right? So whatever Stevie Nicks is related to is where I want to go. So anyway, our Carl, he looks just like Dane, my son Dane, a little bit bigger. He has driven us all over Europe with the tour company. It would be fun. I think it would be fun, too, to meet up with Del Marie and Barbara in those places. Del Marie has already said that she will meet up with us if we go to Chaco Canyon. And Barbara will meet up with us, of course, if we go into Haisapa, and I'm sure Del Marie would as well. Haisapa, the Black Hills, or up at Medicine Wheel, or Devil's Tower, to meet us there, to have ceremony, to be with sacred. Because here's where we all are. There's ancestral sacred, and then there's here we are sacred. Here we are. And the longer we're here, the more we become part of it as a bloodline. Isn't that the truth? My mother's family came here to the United States in 1937, so they've not really been here all that long. They came from Belgium and the Netherlands. My grandmother came here from the Netherlands, and my grandfather came here from Belgium. Belgique. And on the king side of the equation, they were always here because they're Native American, but they came here from Africa, and they came here from Wales and Scotland via England at the time. And they've been here for 400 years. And it becomes part of us, this land. And the more that we are sacred with the land, the more that it becomes part of us, and then it becomes part of our ancestors. I love that. So we're going to explore that. We're going to explore sacred right here on Turtle Island with one another. Did you hear, Chue, that I've already signed you up to be part of our tour guide system? And bring it home. And one thing that I do believe is true, that whenever we experience sacred and we really ensconce ourselves in it, we're never the same. We're never, ever the same. And I think that's really the point of it. So whether it's a sacred ceremony, coming to a sweat lodge, or going to, I don't know, whatever it is that you experience in your life as sacred, I think it helps us to grow, to have a different worldview. Creating sacred here in our home is something we do, particularly every Sunday. I am very vigilant about every Sunday in this home smudging the home, clearing this home. And whether it's, again, with sage and cedar or whether it's with cinnamon. Cinnamon incense is one of my favorites. Cinnamon, some of those wonderful Greek incenses. Creating sacred in our home. Bringing all of those experiences that we experience out in the world, bringing them home and putting them to practice. It's fun when we go somewhere else and we bring home the Greek spices or the Irish spices. I'm almost out of my spices from Ireland from last year. Got to get some more. Cook with them all the time. And so every time I'm cooking with the Greek spices from Santorini or Mykonos, or my Irish spices, or I'm burning the incense from France or Greece or Italy, I'm brought back to that sacred. And when we're brought back to sacred, there's an energetic thing that happens with us. Our chemistry changes, our attitude changes, our energy changes, and pretty soon all of that is in our home, it's in our workspace, it's in our relationships. We look at the world differently. We look at people differently. We look at our own world differently. Maybe we look at what we were taught differently when we bring sacred home. My first trip to Egypt, I'll never forget the familiarity of listening to the call to prayer. Right at dawn, the Islamic call to prayer over the speakers throughout Cairo. And I woke up and there was just this welling inside my heart, listening to the call to prayer. And I just sat with it. And I'm not Muslim, but there was something about the singing, the chanting. Maybe somewhere in the line, the bloodline, it's that. Maybe it is somewhere. Going into the temples and touching the stones felt very familiar. How many times have I touched these stones? Here at the Temple of Horus at Edfu, how many times have I been to the Isle of Skye, which is the home, the clan home of Clan MacDonald. And on the king's side, we come from Clan MacDonald, from the Isle of Skye, which is where still to this day, Castle MacDonald exists. And there we were. Laura, you were there. Nikki, you were there with me. Lily, if you're listening, you were there as well. There we were in that abbey. And we all said, well, it felt so familiar there in Scotland, right there. And little did I know at that time that not too far away from there is the ancestral home of my father's family, who then, after the fall of Clan MacDonald in 1460, made their way to England and Wales and changed their name from MacDonald to King, and made their way across the pond to Turtle Island, where they married and met with Native American men and women. And all of it is familiar and all of it is sacred. And soon my African relatives would come to the shores of Turtle Island on ships. And for 400 years, they would be here on this land to meet up with my relatives who had already been on this land because this is where they're from. There's so many dimensions to sacred and so many ways that we touch our own antiquity. And we don't always understand it. But it does perfume us, and I like that, perfume us. I've never been to the Netherlands, and I do want to go there. I have lots of relatives who still live in Amsterdam and Holland, and not Holland, Michigan, but Holland in the Netherlands. I've got many cousins that would like for me and Corey and cousin Johnny, I'm sure, to come and visit, to be present. It's amazing when you go to another country that is the country of your ancestors or not, how much you find out we're so much alike. And we find out other people's perceptions of who we are. And I'm a pretty strong, I'm an Army brat. And so I have a lot of thoughts when it comes to veterans, when it comes to war, because I come from a long line of warriors from all the way back to Clan MacDonald, right? And before that, here on Turtle Island. Come from a very long line of European and Native warriors. So I have my thoughts about all of that. And I do have a flag in my front yard. It's there, Okay, so I said all that. And there was only, like one time when I was really kind of, and some of you were there with me in Killarney, Ireland last year. And there was a troubadour singing his thoughts about Americans. And immediately he spotted me and he looked at me and he said, "Are you an American rebel?" I said, "Well, funny that you should use those terms. But I am an American, yes, from the States. I mean, America is a big, huge continent. Covers a lot of terra firma, not just the United States. But I am from the United States." And a crowd gathered because the songs that he was singing, wow. Listening to what they were singing. Some of you were with me in that moment. Todd was with me. And I challenged him on a few things because one of the songs that he had written, and he was a traveling troubadour. He was an older gentleman. It really got me. It really got me. Laura's saying, "I'm now your cousin. I'm going too." Oh, good. I'm sure somewhere you are, Laura. But the troubadour in Ireland was singing what a lot of people think about Americans these days. And me being me, because I can't keep my mouth shut, I stepped right up and I challenged him on some of it. How are we viewed, and how do we view, and how does that change? And there were some people gathered there in that moment, a crowd of Irish, that were wondering what this American rebel was going to say about what the troubadour was singing about Americans. That Americans, I can't even bring myself to say, but I did challenge it. I wasn't just going to take that. I guess that's where the rebel blood kind of came to the surface. But that was a moment, and I'll never forget it. And there was a part of me in that moment, and the first time of all of my years of traveling, and I've traveled, well, really my whole life because I was brought up in a military family. It was the first time in my life that I felt embarrassed to be an American in that moment, to be associated with that part of America. And so with the crowd gathered, I assured everyone that we're not all as it seems. We're not all as it seems. And I remember getting back to Joe and Maria's house that night. Oh my God, what a beautiful place they have there in Ireland. We'll be staying there again. And I remember I just kind of sat down for a minute and cried. And not that I think that America is the end-all beat-all. I kind of sort of do in many ways, but not always. And I was glad that I stood up in that moment. It was a sacred moment for me. And I thought, well, what would the Sarge do? What would Billy King do in this moment? And I channeled them both simultaneously in that moment. And the troubadour stopped singing when I was done with what it is that I had to say in that moment. And I think it was probably maybe a sacred moment for all of the Irish people who had been there singing along with him until this American rebel stepped up and said some things. It was a sacred moment for me. Clearly, I'm still talking about it. It chokes me up when I think about it. Finding sacred and bringing sacred home. So what do you do with those experiences? They become part of. They become part of our walk, of our worldview, of the way that we are in the world. The way that we are in the world is inspired by sacred moments of laughter, sacred moments of soul, sacred moments of conversation, of being with Creator, rather than just put it in a photo album, to let it become part of, is bringing sacred home. Sacred ain't always pretty. Sacred ain't always funny. And that moment wasn't funny or pretty. Using our voice. Being good people. That's sacred. Just be a good person. That's what I always just say to myself. Dana, just be a good person. Just be a good person. It was a meant to be moment. Yeah. Today is a sacred day in the Vatican City. Are you in the Vatican City right now, Donna? Are you back over there in Rome? What's going on at the Vatican? Vaticano. Yeah, we were at the Vatican a couple of years ago. Boy, that was something. That was a multi-dimension of wow and holy wow. And are you kidding me? And wow, right? Multi-dimensions of sacred there at Vatican. So Donna, it's got to be, what, early evening for you if you're there in Rome. I loved Rome. Todd and I are going to go back to Rome. We've got to go back to Rome. I loved it. I love shopping in Rome. Oh my goodness. They're buying scarves over there by Trevi Fountain and going to the statue of Lori Bruno's great uncle, Giordano Bruno, having sacred ceremony there. Oh, sacred, sacred. Well, we're bringing sacred home here to Native North America with Temple Within Travels. And of course, we'll still go across the pond to Amsterdam and Holland and Iceland and get our Viking on and all that good kind of a thing, because that's what we do. And in the meantime, remember that you're sacred, and wherever you are is sacred. Spend some time with you and the sacred of you and perfume your home with that. With that. Next up, everybody, is the beautiful Terry Ruel. So I've got to dip out, duck out, come back on. Terry's going to be talking about the fact that, oh my goodness, it is exhausting right now. Absolutely exhausting. And some people are really experiencing exhaustion. And she's going to talk about that today. I'm really looking forward to her conversation about worry fatigue. A lot of people worrying right now. A lot of people worrying needlessly. Maybe they're worrying because they have things to worry about. But worry fatigue, what is that? And how do we help ourselves through it? For me, I help my worry fatigue by going into sacred space. That's my methodology. Sacred ceremony, sacred space. But there are many ways. Let's talk about worry fatigue. So up next is therapist, LMSW, Terry Ruel, everybody. So I hope you come back and you join us back in the chat room. Until then, get out there and shine your light as only you can shine it. Blessings be, everybody. Have a beautiful day.